Hello, WCA. Mike Amori. Nice job in class today on February 11th. I want to review with you what we did, especially for the kids who couldn't make it. I know there was a tournament in Bronxville today. So in case you missed the class or would like a review, we looked at this position, which came from a two knights defense, and I'll show you the opening in a moment. But we were discussing here a set position, meaning it was up on the demo board without me moving it for a while. So at any point you can pause the video and see, in your opinion, if you think black is doing okay here, even though they're down 2 pawns. Well, it turns out that they are, and putting this position on a computer, the computer will tell you pretty quickly that this game is close to equal or maybe even slightly favor black. And at first, as you're learning chess, that seems pretty hard to understand. But when you think of the future that the pieces have, I mean, you can see that both of these black bishops have lots of different options. There's a knight over here for white that's kind of out here by itself. This is a loose piece that I'm circling, meaning it's out there without protection. So anytime this knight from f6 moves, there is going to be an attack against this piece. That can be an issue. Oh, didn't want that to happen. Okay. The rook on c8 is already attacking a pawn that's loose. As a matter of fact, white's first move in this position was to play knight c3 to develop a piece and stop the rook maybe from taking a pawn, although the rook's main job wasn't to go after that pawn. If we back up for a minute, you'll see that white has some serious catching up to do in development. Once this queen moves, the rooks are connected, and that means every minor piece has either been traded or is in the game. Okay, let me show you how we got there. The game started off with e4, e5, and we get into a typical, what could be an Italian game, but black plays the two knights defense. And the two knights defense does allow, not always, but white doesn't have to go this route, but you will get players that will come after this very sensitive f-pawn. If you're playing the two knights defense because you're just bringing a minor piece out, you could get crushed in these openings. You have to know what you're doing if you're going to allow this move, knight to g5. So in the game, black plays one of the main lines, which is d5, just to block out the bishop. Pawn takes, and now knight to a5. I put in the notes in this game the possibility of knight takes here on d5. And I don't recommend that you do this unless you've been taught what to do if white takes this pawn down here on f7. And that can come as quite a shocker if you're not prepared. You have to take that knight because it's attacking your queen and rook. And when you take it, you may wonder why white would give up a whole piece. Well, they're going to hit you with queen f3. And when they do, you'll see your knight here is being attacked twice. And the only way you can save this knight is to play king e6 and give it a second protector. The problem with this move, even though you do have an extra piece for the moment, is black is really going to be tied up. And if you're not sure how to handle this with black, you will get crushed. I mean, white is going to play moves like d4, castle, knight c3, and hit you with everything they have. And there are ways for black to defend this position, but if you don't know them, you're asking for trouble. So don't go that way. So in the game, black played another main line. So let's go back. Here's g5, pawn up, pawn takes, and now the knight a5 move, which asks the question to the bishop, hey, what do you want to do? So in the position, bishop b5 check was played, pawn to c6, and here black gives up a pawn to chase the bishop away. Although there's a tactical way that white does not have to give the bishop a run. It doesn't have to move, and that's the move queen f3. And I'll put the highlight on. You see the queen is pinning the pawn to the bishop. And we've already discussed here that, you know, can you take that bishop? what if they take your rook in the corner and you play bishop e7? There's a lot of compensation here. I think black can actually get away with this, but we'll save this for another time. But in the game, black played the main line, which is bishop to e7, just trying to get castled quickly, and white gets a little greedy. They go for a second pawn. So what they do is they use the bishop here just to snap off the pawn on c6, but the problem with this move, it's really twofold. One, you're giving this knight on a5 something to do, namely, after bishop takes, capturing this bishop. When you capture the bishop, the knight is no longer, out here in the wilderness. It's useful. It makes a trade. And then, of course, when white takes, you need to guard your rook. And the only way to do that is to play bishop to d7. So when you make this trade with white, not only does the knight come back into the game and make a useful trade, but the black bishop comes into the game with a tempo. In the game I showed you, the queen went to f3, black castled, white castled, and here black step by step prepares attacking ideas on every move. This is the position you saw when I started the video. White played knight to c3 to stop the rook from taking, and watch how black uses the open lines. If black plays quiet chess and makes a bunch of fair trades, they're going to find themselves in the endgame 2 pawns down. That ain't fun. So instead, they're like, hey, how about bishop to c6? And now you see the real usefulness of this rook is that any piece that gets on this line for black will have the support of this rook. The queen went to f5, just trying to annoy black. And, if you move this knight, you get mated down here. And black was happy to push a pawn in front of their king because, you can't really harm me on these dark squares. You need to move your queen. So she goes to h3. And now the attacking idea, remember I said this knight is not being attacked? Not being protected, rather. So now, very cool idea. Now knight h5. Where's the attack this time? It's on this knight here on g5. And every single move is coming with an attack. You see the diagonal here? Okay, so the knight runs into the center. And you can pause your video. Can you find another attacking move? Okay, great. There were two. F5 was played in the game, which is a very interesting idea. Or how about, I don't know, knight f4? Knight f4 sets up an opportunity for white to go wrong. You're hitting the queen. And a lot of people will be like, well, I'll just put the queen on a square like, I don't know, g3, because there is no knight fork here because it's protected. And this is one of the positions I put in the blog for you. Well, what if you just take this knight? And all of a sudden, black is winning a full piece because you can't take that bishop. If you do, you get checked. King goes in the corner. Thank you for a nice game. You guys see that? It's a pretty cool line. So knight f4 would have been a really nice try. Instead, the master playing black just played f5 and kicked the knight. And here, white made a very, very difficult decision to give a piece back. If the knight moves to, not f4, I'm sorry. If the knight moves to, say, g3, you have the same idea, knight f4. And here, where does that queen go? She's running out of squares. If queen h6, then maybe bishop to g5. And all of a sudden, you're getting trapped up there. So I don't want to show you all the lines because we did some work in class. I'm just giving you the idea that if you're down 2 pawns and you have open lines and active pieces, use everything, including the pawns. Now, after this knight got attacked, I think white felt, I need to give some material back because I'm so far behind in development. My queen is running short of squares, so I'm going to play the move d3. And by playing d3, you see the nice idea. You let the bishop in the game, and I'm going to let white simply take the knight. But it's kind of getting bad already because black did take the knight, rather. And if you take back, now a new target shows up on the board. the f2 pawn. Do you guys see how to target that pawn? Bishop to c5 was played, and all of a sudden there's a lot of pressure coming up the board. And don't forget that black got the piece back. Bishop e3, and instead of dealing with that bishop, attacking yours, black attacks the queen. You see how beautifully these pieces go back and forth, creating threats all over the board? And here, white decided to just go for it and play crazy chess. And what I mean by that, it's like, well, you know, you're attacking my queen, well, I'll simply attack yours. But normally when you're the one that has less activity and you go for these trades, it works out for the other guy. So bishop takes queen, bishop takes queen, rook takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, and now rook to d2, and here white resigned. Now remember, these are masters, but white's position is really bad. There's a huge hole here on f4 where this knight's going to find a beautiful home. You have three pieces attacking the f-pawn that's pinned. It can't even move because there's a pin to the king. There's no way to save this pawn. This pawn's going to fall. The knight's going to hop into f4 someday. This is not good. And white resigned. Okay? So it's a very, very quick review. If you're down pawns, let's look at this position, or even go one back further. You're down 2 pawns, and you have all of this activity, you know what to do. Don't sit and be quiet. Get the pieces going. If you have the extra pawns, don't get too greedy. You have to catch up in development, and you may even have to give something back so that you can survive the middle game. Okay, my friends? I hope you're learning something. See you next week.